Sometimes a person is way too attached to what they're seeking. You're going to ruin it, number one, and it's not good for your heart, number two. Most importantly, it's not good for your heart. Too much attachment to, now we've been talking about dua. Dua is always about something, right? But really the end result of dua should be nearness to Allah. So sometimes we become too attached to the created thing that we're seeking, and that's a problem. And it's not pleasing to Allah, that level of attachment. So that when you finally get it, if you're not cured of that level of attachment, notice I'm saying level of attachment. We don't believe in just 100% detachment. Otherwise, 100% detached from my kids. Okay, so it gets run over and I don't shed a tear. It's not human, it's not normal, it's not the sunnah. So some attachment is part of life. In the Quran tells you must love Allah and His Messenger more than these other things. So it's admitting that we love these things. And that ayah means that we would not disobey Allah for the sake of these things. We would not decrease our worship of Allah for the sake of these things. So if our attachment is way too much, then when we receive this thing, we're not going to do good. We're going to do bad. We disobey Allah for the sake of preserving this thing. All right. So you finally get to marry the woman of your dreams. Now you're following her around like a puppy and you forget about Allah, forget about striving, forget about da'wah, forget about the masajid. That's not what Allah wants for you. That's not what's pleasing to Allah. You can have what you're seeking in a balanced way. In a way, you haven't lost the huquq of Allah and your number one attachment remains to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is, again, to decrease and rectify your level of love of the creation so that Allah Ta'ala remains to be the sole source of your attachment. So you made dua for a reason, but Allah wants to elevate your motivation. And elevate your motivation by not granting you your wish until you learn that dua is something that you should get used to never leaving off with the same intensity, whether He gives you or doesn't give you, when He gives you and after He gives you. So how about perhaps the delay is to teach you a lesson on how to be content without it. As Shafi'i said, if you learn to be content without something, then you can enjoy it. But if you can't be content without it, then you're going to be its slave. You will be the slave of that thing if you cannot be content without it. So being content without it doesn't mean I don't want it. Doesn't mean I'm detached from it, but it's a different skill. It's a skill of the heart. Learn to be content so that with or without this thing, I'm good. I'm not going to collapse. I'm not going to have a crisis. This delay is for you, not against you. So you can learn how to be content. And this is the way of the Arifina Billah. The Arifina Billah, they lived long enough to know that and to experience that our dua will not just be rest upon the motivation of desire, nor rest upon the motivation of fear, but rather will be for the sake of Allah alone.